I was driving in the car, and my daughter Anna was crying. Anna. Her fragile figure pained me so much that I could barely stand it. Anna was only 3 years old. She was far too young to have lost her father, William. As she grows older, the loneliness will surely follow her. I had already made up my mind. I would cherish Anna for William's sake as well. Then, suddenly, her crying stopped. The suddenness of it caught me off guard, and I glanced at her through the rearview mirror. This road was deserted, used only by locals, with very little traffic. There were few street lights, so the area was dim, making visibility poor. Anna was gazing intently out the window. Then, "Look, Dad is back. It's Dad." Suddenly, the once crying Anna shouted in a voice bursting with excitement. "What?" Shocked, I slammed on the brakes. William had undoubtedly passed away. I had personally watched as his coffin was carried to the crematorium. Yet Anna was pointing outside. "Mom, look, Dad is here." She kept shouting, filled with excitement. Thinking it impossible, I nervously followed her gaze. "What?" And the scene that came into view left me speechless. "No, this can't be. Why are you?" Despite the chill running down my spine, I stepped hard on the accelerator. "My name is Pamela, 40 years old. Before I got married, I worked in the bridal industry, but now I'm a housewife. Since I was a little girl, I had always dreamed of wedding dresses and knew I wanted to work in that field. I pursued that dream, aiming to become a bridal stylist, and worked hard for it. After graduating from vocational school, I finally got the job I had always wanted, but the struggles never seemed to end. That's when I met my husband, William. He was a senior colleague at the same company, though in a different department. One lunch break, when I was deep in thought, he came over to talk to me. "You've got dark circles under your eyes. Haven't been sleeping well. The nap room is free now." It seemed he had noticed me sitting there, lost in thought, not even touching my lunchbox. Having dark circles under my eyes was an unthinkable thing for a stylist. However, at that time, I was so exhausted that I didn't have much emotional capacity. When he spoke to me with concern, I responded with a vague smile. "I'm sorry, I must be causing you trouble." No, you're not causing any trouble at all. Do you have something on your mind? If you don't mind, I'm happy to listen." He sat down next to me. As he did, I noticed the name tag hanging from his neck, and seeing that he was from another department, I felt relieved. If he's from another department, it's okay to vent a little, whispered a small devil in my heart. My worries were piling up, and I desperately wanted to get them off my chest. So I decided to talk to him. I told him about how my junior colleague wasn't motivated and wouldn't listen to me, how working overtime every day was taking a toll on my body, and how I was so stressed that I couldn't sleep well. Even though I was basically complaining, William listened patiently, never showing a hint of annoyance. He was so kind and a great listener. He attentively listened to everything I said, nodding at the right moments and offering spot-on advice. As it turned out, many of his colleagues would come to him for advice, and he was well trusted by everyone. Perhaps because of that, he had become a bit of a busybody and couldn't help but reach out when he saw someone who seemed troubled. Dependable he was, without a doubt, popular wherever he went. From that day on, whenever I had worries, I would turn to William for advice. I can honestly say that I was able to keep working because of him. Gradually, our conversations became more frequent, shifting from problem solving to casual chats. And eventually, we started dating. After a year of dating, we got married. I finally got to wear the pure white dress I had always dreamed of as a little girl. After the wedding, I became a housewife, focusing on supporting him and after we were blessed with our daughter Anna 3 years ago, taking care of both William and Anna became my full-time job. My new dream is to one day see Anna in a wedding dress. Whenever I talked about it, William would smile and say, "When that time comes, I want to be the one to plan it." I wonder if I'll still be working by then. I'm sure you will be, but at the very least, you'll need to take care of your health. Since we both worked in the bridal industry, we often talked about wedding plans, venues, or the best types of dresses. We knew we were getting ahead of ourselves, but talking about an uncertain future like that was something special to both of us. I never doubted that those peaceful days would continue forever. Then, one evening, I had just finished making dinner, waiting for him to come home while playing with Anna, when my smartphone suddenly rang loudly. When I checked the screen, the call was from an unfamiliar number. Since it was around the time William was supposed to come home, I had been expecting a call from him, so I felt a bit disappointed. I didn't really want to answer a call from an unknown number, but I couldn't just ignore it. I told Anna, who was playing with her dolls, "Wait just a moment." "Okay," and pressed the answer button. "Hello, this is Pamela." Though I was wary, I answered the phone cheerfully as usual. I didn't want to make William, who was surely tired from work, worry unnecessarily. I always tried to speak with the intention of sharing my energy with him. Because of that habit, I greeted the caller in a bright tone, but in the next moment, I was plunged into a deep sense of dread. "Good evening. This is the police. Is this Pamela, William's wife?" The voice on the other side of the phone was a man's, someone I didn't recognize. Yes, that's right." Hearing that it was the police, I responded with a tense voice, my anxiety growing. Why would the police be calling me? What could have happened? Naturally, William, who hadn't come home yet, crossed my mind, and a bad feeling began to swell within me. Could something have happened to him? No, I shouldn't jump to conclusions just yet. Maybe it's a scam. However, that faint hope was immediately shattered. "Please remain calm as I explain. Earlier today, William." The police explained the situation. He had finished work and was on his way home, but on his usual route, he was unfortunately caught in a multiple-car pileup caused by a reckless driver. He had been in the car right in the middle of the 3 vehicles involved. His leg's major artery had been severely damaged, and before the ambulance could arrive, he had lost too much blood and passed away. "No, that can't be," I mumbled in disbelief, listening to the sympathetic voice of the officer on the other end. I couldn't believe what I was hearing over the phone. Unconsciously, I collapsed to the floor. "Mom, what's wrong?" Both the officer's voice and Anna's concerned voice seemed to come from far away. Did something sad happen? Anna stopped playing with her dolls and came over to me. This little girl, still so young, had just lost her father. "Anna, everything will be all right," I murmured, as if trying to reassure myself, while hugging her small body. Her childlike warmth was almost startling as I held her close. Realizing that William would never again feel this warmth or witness her growing up made the tears fall uncontrollably. Anna, unaware of the gravity of what had just happened, giggled innocently, simply happy to be hugged by me. The future we had dreamed of was shattered in an instant. The news of William's death brought sorrow not only to our family, but also to our relatives and many of his coworkers. He was reliable, kind, and well-liked by everyone. Many people must have admired him. My smartphone was flooded with calls and texts asking about the details of the funeral and wake. I was constantly occupied with paperwork related to his affairs and funeral preparations. Perhaps because I was so busy, I had no time to fully sink into my grief, and my mind remained eerily calm. I found it hard to leave the house, and couldn't muster the strength to send Anne off to preschool with the usual smile. It felt as if a huge hole had opened in my heart, and the days without him flew by in a blur. "Hey, Mom, Dad's late, isn't he? When is he coming back? Is he still at work?" Anna had somehow sensed that my sadness was connected to William not coming home. She was too young to fully understand the meaning of death. Every day after returning from preschool, she would sit by the front door with a puzzled look and ask me those questions. Each time, my heart would ache with overwhelming emotion. A few days after William's death, a package from an online store arrived at our house. It seemed that William had ordered it. I still hadn't come to terms with everything enough to begin sorting through his belongings. I wasn't feeling up to it, but Anne excitedly asked, "What's inside?" So I peeled off the tape. When I opened the box, inside was a teddy bear wearing a wedding dress. I gasped. It was the same one Anna had admired about a month ago when the three of us had gone out. She had seen it in a shop window and exclaimed, "So cute." At that time, come to think of it, Anna's birthday is next month. Maybe we should get this for her, he had said. Only then did I remember that Anna's birthday was approaching. "I almost forgot about the day you were born." I was shocked at myself. I had been so consumed by grief that I had nearly neglected something so important to my dear Anna. She took the teddy bear out of the box and looked up at me with sparkling eyes. "Wow, it's so cute. Mom, isn't it cute? I really wanted this. Is this a present from Dad?" As she looked at me with her innocent gaze, I felt a sense of resolve begin to grow inside me. I have to get it together. Anna must be feeling just as uncertain as I was about William being gone. But despite her own fears, she had been worrying about me all along, doing her best to be strong. I was the only one left who could protect this pure and innocent child. I knelt down to match Anna's eye level and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "That's right, Anna. Listen carefully. This is Dad's last present to you. You won't be able to see him anymore." Sensing from my serious tone that this was an important conversation, Anna quietly listened. She hugged the teddy bear tightly to her chest, her face filled with worry. "Why?" "Because he's not anywhere anymore. Even though Anna is here, he won't come to see me." "Does that mean Dad doesn't like me anymore?" "Dad will always love you, Anna, but he can't come to see you anymore." As I said this, Anna's eyes quickly filled with tears. Wiping away the unstoppable stream of tears, I pulled Annie into a hug. "Even though he's not here, Mom will always be with you, Anna." Soon, Anna began to sob out loud, and as if triggered by her cries, I too couldn't hold back my sobs and gave in to the overwhelming sadness. A few days later, William's funeral was held. Many people attended, and William, resting in his coffin, was surrounded by countless flowers. Perhaps Anna finally understood that her father was truly gone, as she had been withdrawn and quiet for days. At the cremation, she couldn't contain her grief any longer and clung to the coffin, bringing tears to the eyes of many, including myself. Even on the way home from the funeral, Anna continued to cry in the car as I drove. Seeing her like this was heartbreaking, and I couldn't bear the pain in my chest. She was far too young to lose her father, and as she grows older, I know that the loneliness will follow her wherever she goes. I need to fill Anna's life with enough love to make up for William's absence. That's the resolve I made in my heart. First, I needed to find a new job, perhaps a bridal company where William used to work, where I had once been employed, would understand our situation and take me back. It was as I was thinking about this that it happened. Suddenly, Anna's sobbing stopped. It was so abrupt that I glanced in the rearview mirror to check on her, puzzled. We were on a quiet, less traveled road that only locals used. The street lights were few, so the surroundings were dim and of visibility poor. Anna was staring intently out the window. And then, it's Dad. Dad's back. The cheerful, excited voice came from Anna, who had been crying just moments before. What? I was so shocked that I slammed on the brakes. William was definitely gone. I had personally watched as his coffin was taken to the crematorium, and yet, Anna was staring out the window, excitedly exclaiming, "Mom, look, it's Dad." Disbelieving, I cautiously followed Anna's gaze. Then, no way, there stood a man I didn't recognize. His hat was pulled low, hiding his face, but his outfit was strikingly similar to William's usual attire. Even his build was reminiscent of William, almost as if his ghost was standing right there. As I froze in shock, the man slowly lifted his head. In that moment, our eyes met through the window, and his dark, murky eyes locked onto mine. Then he smiled, a sinister, chilling grin that made my blood run cold. Driven by fear, I quickly slammed on the gas. "No, Dad," Anna cried out in distress. I didn't have the presence of mind to explain that Wachisu wasn't her dad. My heart pounded in my chest, and my palms were damp with nervous sweat. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw the man, still standing there, watching us until he faded from view. Once we got home, I tried again to explain to Anna that Dad was gone, repeating it over and over. But Anna remained convinced of what she had seen. Unwavering in her belief, she had seen someone who shouldn't exist anymore. I understood the desire to believe that he was still alive. Anna was still too young to fully comprehend what had happened, but I knew without a doubt that was not William, and there couldn't be two of him. The man I loved was the only one in the world. And no matter how much it hurt, I didn't doubt my own feelings. However, after that day, I became plagued by the presence of that ghostly figure. One day, on our way back from picking Annie up from preschool, something happened. Anna was in a good mood, singing along as the car gently rocked with the road. "Hey, Anna, what did you do today?" It had become our daily routine to talk about what Anna did and what her favorite part of the day was, and it was something I always looked forward to on the ride home. Anna, as if she had been waiting for my question, replied in an excited voice. "Today, we sang songs, drew pictures. Look, I drew this." Saying that, Anna showed me a sheet of paper through the rearview mirror. On it, 3 figures holding hands in a row were drawn with colorful crayons. "Is this Anna, Mom, and Dad?" "That's right." Anna smiled happily, pleased that I had guessed correctly. Then, she said, "I saw Dad again today. He was wearing these clothes today." Her innocent words left me speechless. Recently, Anna had been saying more and more frequently, "Dad was here." The place where we had seen the ghost on the way back from the funeral was near our home. Judging by Anna's words, that figure was somewhere within our living area, and often close enough for Anna to see regularly. If it was just someone coincidentally dressed like William, there wouldn't be much to worry about. But for Anna to mistake him for her dad so frequently made me think it could be intentional, someone deliberately pretending to be William. What on earth was their motive for impersonating him? I hardened my voice and tried to explain to Anna. "Anna, Dad is gone, right? That man is not Dad." But Anna, who had seen Dad with her own eyes several times, wouldn't listen to me. "That's not true. It was Dad." "You're lying, Mom." On the verge of tears, Anna desperately insisted on what she had seen, despite my stern tone. Though I wanted to keep telling her she was wrong, I knew it wouldn't be right to dismiss her claims so harshly, so I let out a small sigh. "Anyway, you mustn't go anywhere with strangers. Promise me this." "Okay, okay." Anna reluctantly nodded, puffing her cheek out in frustration. Feeling the growing sense of unease day by day, I silently prayed to William, who was no longer here, asking for his strength to help protect Anna. But the situation only worsened. For example, when Anna and I went out together, I increasingly felt like we were being watched. Whoever was watching us, it was from somewhere, and the sensation was sticky and unnerving. When I turned around cautiously, all I saw was the hustle and bustle of the crowd. The gaze was sharp, constantly observing our daily life. Moreover, Anna's sightings of Dad became more frequent, whether on the way back from preschool or when playing in the park. Anna would excitedly tell me every time we went outside, "I just saw Dad." Each time, I explained patiently, with growing anxiety, that Dad was no longer anywhere, and that Anna had seen that for herself. Anna would nod and agree in those moments, but then, out of the blue, she would ask, "Mom, why don't you let Dad into the house? It's so sad. At this rate, something bad is bound to happen." I knew this couldn't be good for her either. My sense of urgency grew stronger. Should I contact the police? Anna kept saying, Dad was there. So I finally decided to consult with the police. They listened to my story earnestly and offered to increase patrols around my home. It felt like a small weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but I still couldn't feel completely at ease. One night, after days like this, shortly after I had brought Anna home from preschool, the doorbell rang. Who could it be at this hour? Could it be that the man had finally come to our home? Considering the timing, it was right after I had returned home, and in light of everything surrounding us, I was on high alert. But standing in front of the door was a man in a slightly wrinkled suit. "Good evening, Pamela. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced. My name is Stephen." He didn't resemble William, nor did he give off a suspicious vibe. Instead, he had a fresh and friendly demeanor. While I stood there, confused, Stephen politely explained himself. Apparently, he was a colleague of William's. They were on fairly good terms, and before William and I got married, they had gone out for drinks together after work. I had him show me his business card just to be sure, and indeed, it confirmed that he worked at the same company William and I had. Feeling relieved, I responded to Stephen's greeting. "Good evening, thank you for coming. Were you here to visit William?" "Yes, I wasn't able to attend the funeral due to other commitments, so I wanted to at least stop by and pay my respects. May I come in?" With a small gift in hand, Stephen said this. Since I didn't sense any falsehood in his words, I gladly invited him inside. I led Stephen to the photograph of William, and then went to the kitchen to boil some water. I didn't have any special snacks, so on the tray I placed just coffee, and, feeling a little embarrassed, glanced over at the photo. Stephen was standing upright in front of it, looking still and composed. "Thank you so much for taking the time to come," I said. "Oh please, no need to thank me," he replied. I placed a coffee beside Stephen, then joined him in facing William's photo. Time passed quietly as we looked at William's face. How much time had gone by, I couldn't say. It's truly heartbreaking that William is gone. In the room, which had been filled only with the ticking of the clock and the sound of Anna's breathing as she timidly hid behind my back, Stephen's voice resonated with emotion. I joined a company the same year as William. We were colleagues from the start. In our younger days, we'd get drunk and compete over who could come up with the better plans, Stephen said, sharing nostalgic memories in a calm voice. His tone was filled with fondness, though there was a touch of sadness as he lowered his eyes. William liked being the go-to person for advice, but sometimes he was troubled by things he couldn't handle on his own. I remember him saying once that the people who didn't just seek his advice, but also chatted with him casually, his wife, especially, were a great source of support for him. He was a dependable, gentle, good man. Pamela, I'm sure his loss has been deeply painful for you. Hearing those words made my heart, still far from healed, want to break into tears. But I reminded myself that I had a guest in front of me, and somehow managed to hold back my emotions. I didn't know he'd said that. I wish he'd told me directly. He probably just wanted to play it cool, especially in front of the person he loved. William used to say he'd help plan our daughter's wedding someday. He really enjoyed coming up with plans. I glanced at Anna, who was playing behind us. She seemed confused at first by the sudden arrival of a stranger, but now she was completely absorbed in playing with the stuffed bear William had given her. Noticing my gaze, Stephen looked at Anna for a few seconds as well and nodded nostalgically. Yes, he used to say how much he genuinely enjoyed helping others find happiness in subtle ways. And well, he just really liked planning things. That's so true. When we went on trips, he would schedule everything down to the minute. I can imagine, even during company trips, he would create a detailed itinerary for our free time, all written out in a little notebook. I can picture it clearly. Our conversation about William's memories unexpectedly lifted my spirits. It made me happy to realize that I wasn't the only one who cherished him, that someone else also remembered him fondly. I began to feel that traces of William were everywhere, woven into the lives of those who knew him. Though the hole left in my heart by his absence would never truly close, I started to believe that I could carry that grief with me and keep living. Before I realized it, we had been talking for nearly 20 minutes. Not wanting to keep Stephen any longer after his workday, I decided to bring the conversation to a close. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sure William would have been glad. But then I suddenly realized that Anna, who had been playing nearby, was no longer in sight. Anna. I stood up and looked around the living room. She had disappeared, along with the stuffed bear she had been playing with. Anna, where are you? Anna. Normally, she would respond right away and come running, but this time, only silence greeted me. A growing sense of unease began to swell within me. Anna, Mom is calling for you. Stephen joined in, sensing my worry. We searched together, checking behind the sofa, in the kitchen, even in the bathroom. But no matter how thoroughly we looked, there was no sign of Anna anywhere. This doesn't make sense. She's nowhere to be found. Maybe she's crawled into a small space and fallen asleep. Or perhaps she went outside. I don't think she went outside, I said, anxiety tightening my chest. Although Anna is only 3 years old, her legs are strong, and her curiosity is boundless. At times, her imagination and energy lead her to do things we adults could never predict. And the moment I take my eyes off her, she disappears. Even though I had enjoyed my conversation with Stephen, I began to regret not keeping a closer watch on Anna. Where could she have gone? Just as panic started to rise within me, I heard Anna's cheerful voice from somewhere. Mom. Startled, I looked up, and Stephen, who had been searching the living room, called out, Pamela, she's in the yard. Is that so? Oh, thank goodness. I felt a wave of relief, almost collapsing to my knees. Lately, our environment had become increasingly unsettling, and it had turned me into a constant worrier. The growing anxiety, and the fact that it was already dark, had caused me to overlook the possibility that she might be in the yard. Anna, it's dangerous to go outside alone when it's this dark, I called out sternly as I opened the door to the yard, ready to scold her for being outside at this late hour. But when I saw what was before me, my breath caught in my throat in terror. Mom, it's him, the guy who looks just like Dad. You told me, right, that he's not Dad. Standing next to Anna was the man, the one dressed eerily similar to William. In the darkness, our eyes locked, and I instinctively took a step back. The man was wearing almost the exact same outfit as William's work clothes, down to the watch, bag, and even his hairstyle. The resemblance was uncanny, so much so that I could understand why Anna had mistaken him for her father. At the same time, seeing the man's face clearly for the first time, I felt a strange sense of familiarity. I couldn't quite place where I had seen him before, but the déjà vu was unsettling, filling me with a cold dread. His expression was maniacal as he stared at me. He's not Dad, but he said he'll take me to see Dad, Anna said with innocent excitement. Both Stephen and I froze at her words. Anna says I'll see Dad again. I didn't need to think deeply to understand what those words meant. Anna was in danger. I had to protect her. Before I could even act on my instinct, Stephen was already moving. He lunged at the man, knocking him to the ground. Let go of Anna, Stephen shouted as he punched the man. The man, caught off guard, fell to the ground. Anna, not understanding what was happening, let out a startled cry and crouched down in shock. I screamed instinctively, rushing to Anna's side as fast as I could. Anna. I couldn't lose her, not Anna. That was all I could think as I embraced her small, cold body. My heart was pounding as if it would burst out of my chest. I managed to dodge the man's outstretched arm as he tried to grab us, and we stumbled back into the house. I told Anna to hide inside. Then, with trembling hands, I fumbled for my smartphone and dialed emergency services. Hello, there's an emergency. A strange man broke into our house and tried to harm my daughter. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of Stephen struggling with the man. No matter what happened, I was determined to protect my daughter at all costs. Clenching the baseball bat I found nearby, I made up my mind. This is my address. Please, hurry, we need help. Soon after, the police arrived, and the man was taken away for trespassing. According to the police, the man who had been imitating William was named Nicholas. Of course, he was a completely different person from William. There was no way he could replace him. Actually, he was one of William's colleagues, Stephen said quietly during the police interrogation. I nodded, thinking to myself, I knew it. I had a feeling he was someone from the company. I thought I'd seen him before somewhere. Before William and I were married, I had occasionally seen Nicholas talking to William. Back then, he didn't seem strange at all. He was always smiling, a cheerful young man who seemed to enjoy his work. Since I was in a different department, I didn't know much about his relationship with William. Stephen explained that Nicholas's behavior was likely because of him. Nicholas came to the city from the countryside, and William often took care of him. He wasn't just helping with work. He'd even listen to his personal problems. William was a great listener, I said. Yes, and because of that, Nicholas became quite attached to him. Stephen sighed deeply before continuing. I never imagined it would escalate to this level. During the interrogation, Nicholas had said the following words: I'll become William. That way, he will always be with me, and no one at work will mock me anymore. It seemed that Nicholas had developed a deep admiration for William, which stemmed from his own feelings of inferiority. In his attempt to become more like William, he started matching his suits, everyday clothes, bags, and watches to William's. He even went to the same barber used to go to and styled his hair the same way. This behavior had apparently started when William was still alive, but after William passed away, Nicholas's obsession spiraled out of control. He believed that if he could claim his family as his own, he could become William himself. That's why he began to observe me and Anna, watching our daily routines. He waited for the right moment, when we were most vulnerable, and finally tried to break into the house. But just as Nicholas was about to carry out his plan, he happened to run into Anna, who had stepped outside to show her teddy bear the night sky. I had noticed that something was off about Nicholas, but "I'm sorry I couldn't do anything sooner," Stephen said, apologizing. "No, Stephen, there's no need for you to apologize," I replied. After William's death, Nicholas had been exhibiting strange behavior even at work. His speech and mannerisms became more and more like William's each day, making the other employees increasingly uncomfortable. During the police interrogation, Anna was visibly downcast, even though she hadn't realized Nicholas's ill intentions. The sight of him and Stephen grappling and hearing my frantic cries must have terrified her. The police recommended that Annie undergo counseling for a while. "Anna, did that man really say he'd take you to see Dad?" I asked gently, trying not to upset her. Hugging her teddy bear tightly, Anna nodded honestly. "Yay, he did. He said if I told anyone, he'd take me to see Dad." I was really happy because I thought I'd get to see Dad again. I had tried to explain to Anna on the day of William's funeral, but it seemed she hadn't fully understood it deep down. She hadn't come to terms with the sudden loss of her father. "I see, you were happy to hear that, weren't you, Anna?" I said softly. It seemed that Nicholas hadn't intended to harm Anna. When she spotted him in the garden, she had been overjoyed, thinking, "Dad's back," and had run up to him excitedly. But as she got closer, she realized it wasn't William, it was someone who merely resembled him. Disappointed, she had tried to return to the house. At that moment, Nicholas, panicked by hearing Stephen's voice from inside, blurted out a threat. "If you tell anyone, I'll take you to your dad's place," almost as if he was trying to scare her. Being so young, Anna took those words at face value and became excited again, thinking she could meet her father. That's when she called out to me, which led to everything that followed. Above all else, I was deeply relieved that nothing terrible had happened to Anna. At the same time, I couldn't help but feel ashamed of myself for letting my guard down and losing sight of her. There was something I needed to tell Anna properly, one more time, about William, who was never coming back. I decided to sit down and talk with Anna after the incident. Even after a night had passed, she still seemed troubled. And no wonder. She had just realized that the person she thought was her dad wasn't him at all. I sat down next to her and spoke calmly. "Anna, there's something I need to talk to you about. It's about Dad, Mom." Anna seemed to understand what I was about to say, and she looked up at me with an expression as if she were about to cry. "Anna, Dad is no longer with us. He won't be coming back, and you can't see him anymore." That man who looked like Dad wasn't really him, was he? Anna nodded quietly. As I gently stroked her small back, I continued, "Dad is the only one you'll ever have. Really, I can never see him again." "Absolutely?" "Yes, absolutely," Anna asked in a trembling, tiny voice. I knew how painful it was, but I had no choice but to confirm it firmly. I was so focused on protecting Anna that I might not have been paying enough attention to her feelings. It wasn't just about me shielding her. We needed to embrace our pain together. "Dad won't be coming back, but he's always watching over you from the sky. From now on, let's do our best together. Just you and me, okay?" Anna quietly nodded and then gently hugged me. Since then, Nicholas has been hospitalized due to his mental instability. Naturally, he was dismissed from the company. It pained me a little to think that his actions stemmed from his deep feelings for William, but that still didn't excuse his behavior. We decided to move out of our old house. I didn't know if something like this would happen again, but just in case, We moved to a highly secure condominium. Although I had left my previous job, my experience working in a bridal company was recognized, and I was able to get a full-time position at another bridal company. At the same time, I began studying to become a wedding planner. Just like William, his dream of planning Anna's wedding became my new dream. I'm home. Mom, welcome back. I brought in the laundry. Oh, and I washed your shoes too. Really, several years had passed since William's death, and Anna had started elementary school. She had grown into a bright, energetic child with many friends, and she seemed to really enjoy school. Lately, she's been helping a lot around the house, doing things like washing dishes and laundry while I'm away. Just last night, she asked, "Can you teach me how to make soup?" It seems she's even started to get interested in cooking. At this rate, the day when Anna gets married might not be too far off. That thought made me feel a little sad, but also happy because it meant that William's dream would come true. Anna, thank you so much. You're really helping me. Anna gave me a bashful smile. Then, hugging her teddy bear dressed in a wedding gown, she proudly declared, "Dad's resting in the sky, so Anna will help Mom in his place." The happiness in Anna's smile filled my heart. I knew she would grow up surrounded by love and support, and that she would share that same love with others too. Someday, far in the future, when I see William again, I'll tell him all about the brilliance of her beautiful smile. You poor woman can just stand and watch. I was so excited to attend my daughter Evelyn's wedding, one of the most important events in her life. But as soon as we arrived at the venue, Melanie, Evelyn's mill, had the audacity to say those words to me. I never expected to be told to just stand and watch. I was so taken aback by her heartlessness that I was left speechless. However, I refused to back down and stay silent. Evelyn is my daughter. She's not the type to endure this kind of treatment without speaking up, a trait she likely inherited from me. Evelyn stood up with a resolute attitude and declared loud and clear to Melanie, "Mom, let's leave here." "Yes, let's go," I agreed. There's no need to let these people ruin such an important day for us. Besides, it seems like these in-laws have no understanding of their place. Since we have this opportunity, it might not be a bad idea to make them understand once and for all. From here on out, our mother-daughter counterattack begins, refusing to be pushed around any longer. Within just 10 minutes of our retaliation, Melanie was on the verge of a breakdown. Seeing her like that makes me feel a sense of vindication, but I'm not ready to let up just yet. If they think they can control us as they please, they're gravely mistaken. I'm Faith, turning 65 this year, but I'm still going strong. I work as a winemaker at a winery. When you hear winemaker, you might imagine a man. But nowadays, I'm happy to say that the number of female winemakers is gradually increasing. I used to be an ordinary woman with no connection to the world of wine. What changed me was a single television program. After graduating from college, I got a job at a regular company. There, I fell in love with a man I met at work, and we were blessed with our daughter, Evelyn. Fortunately, I was able to take full advantage of the company's maternity and child care leave policies, which allowed me to dedicate myself to raising my child without any worries. The days spent with Evelyn as she grew up were filled with a happiness that nothing could replace. Yet, there were moments when a small doubt crept into my mind. Is this really enough for my life? On the surface, I had a thriving career, an adorable daughter, and a blessed work environment. My friends often expressed their envy. Still, there were times like when my daughter was napping, when I was overcome by a sense of emptiness. It was an inescapable void, like a gaping hole in my heart. One such day, while Evelyn was napping, I turned on the TV and found myself engrossed in a documentary program that caught my eye. The show followed the work of a winemaker. The man being interviewed said he used to be an ordinary salaryman. As he spoke about quitting his job to pursue his passion for wine and his quest to create the perfect bottle, I felt something stirring deep within me. Perhaps this was what I had been yearning for all along. My father loved wine, and when I lived at home, we enjoyed it together almost every evening. The recommended temperature, the perfect food pairings, the unique flavors, depths, and aromas of each wine back then, I drank without much thought. But looking back, I realize how incredible it all was. I couldn't help but be amazed by the profound world of wine. Of course, I knew that winery owners were a male-dominated society. There were only a handful of female winemakers out there. That's precisely why I began to nurture a desire to create wines that women could enjoy deliciously and joyfully. My family supported my career change. I'm still filled with gratitude for their cooperation in household chores and picking up the kids. Thanks to their help, I was able to get jobs at a winery in the next town over. As it happened, that area had many wineries, and I encountered one that was looking to take on new challenges. I worked as a clerk and a tour guide while studying the fundamentals of wine every day. Since it was a field I was already interested in, I found the learning process enjoyable. I felt a sense of fulfillment that I had never experienced in my previous jobs. But then, just as things were going well, my husband fell ill and passed away. I couldn't let the hopes of my husband, who had supported my dreams and encouraged my winemaking, go to waste. I remember vividly the joy I felt when, after desperately working my way up, I finally joined the ranks of the few female winemakers in the U.S. As a novice female winemaker, in an era when women in the field were not as rare as they are today, my name never made it into the spotlight. But whether my name was known or not didn't matter to me. I believed there was no greater happiness than having the wine I poured my heart into creating be released into the world, bringing moments of joy to many people. As my career began to take off, I received some exciting news in my personal life. "Hey, Mom, there's someone I want to introduce to you," Evelyn said shyly. "I met him at a town event the other day." "This might be the first time I've introduced someone other than a friend to you, Mom." "Someone other than a friend?" With those words, I had a hunch. "No way." "Yeah, he's a wonderful person. Someone I feel I could be with forever. I'm sure you'll like him too, Mom." On the day Evelyn told me about him, I went to our meeting spot and saw a man standing next to her. He was tall and had an impressive, dignified presence. "Mom, this is my boyfriend, Christopher Garcia." Christopher looked at me and greeted me with a friendly smile. It was a perfect smile, like that of a Hollywood actor. He said he was 40, but with such a smart demeanor and charming grin. I thought to myself that women wouldn't leave him alone. "Hello. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today, despite your busy schedule. I've been wanting to meet Evelyn's mother for a while now. We started dating after meeting at a town event. I never imagined I'd encounter such a wonderful person there, so I felt it was destiny. Don't be embarrassed. It's only natural, since Evelyn was the only one shining so brightly in that place." As if remembering the moment they met, the two suddenly started engaging in sweet conversation. Evelyn had never been involved in any frivolous talk about men before, always focused on her work. That's why, as a parent, I was genuinely happy that she had found someone she could care for so deeply. During our casual chat, I learned that Christopher was an only child and that he was likely to take over his family's local business in the future. Oh, you're continuing the family business? Yes, although it's not anything particularly impressive. If you don't mind me asking, what kind of work is it? We run the Garcia Hotel. It's been getting busy lately, so I'll probably have to start acting as the next president soon. At that moment, Evelyn suddenly fell silent. It's wonderful that you're already thinking seriously about such matters. Since we had just met, I thought it best not to say anything awkward and chose my words carefully. Well, given those circumstances, Evelyn has been helping out with various tasks at our place. Sort of like training to be a hotel manager, you could say. Christopher spoke with a gentle smile and took a sip of the tea in front of him. For a brief moment, I thought I saw Evelyn's expression stiffen. Seeing that expression gave me an unsettling feeling. Huh? Helping out. Christopher raised his hand as if to stop me and began speaking over my words. Well, it's not anything major. But you know, at this age, you can't help but start thinking about the future. I'd like Evelyn to become a part of our family. The way Christopher spoke in a torrent of words gave me the impression that he wasn't giving me any opportunity to interject. Is that so? So Evelyn kindly agreed to help out, which has been a huge relief. I want to make sure she never feels embarrassed about coming to the Garcia house. Evelyn is just an ordinary girl you could find anywhere. She graduated from a local university, works as a company employee, and enjoys shopping and drinking with friends on her days off. She's not the type to stand out much, which made it all the more puzzling. Come to think of it, I hadn't had a single chance to talk directly with Evelyn during this tea session. Hey, speaking of which, Evelyn, as I tried to speak to her, Christopher once again cut in without missing a beat. That's right, Evelyn. You're going to my mom's place after this, aren't you? My mom's been looking forward to picking out your dress. Yes, of course. A dress, could it be? We were talking about having the wedding sometime this year. Popular venues get booked up quickly if you don't reserve early. With a refreshing smile, Christopher looked straight into my eyes and said clearly, I believe a wedding is a kind of closure. That's why I want it to be a space where we can spend a special time with the people important to us. It might be a bit early, but our parents are already getting excited. I was surprised that they were already talking about the wedding, but at the same time, I felt like I had figured out the source of the uneasiness. I understood now the true nature of this discomfort. Whenever I try to talk to Evelyn, Christopher interrupts, as if he's avoiding any opportunity for us to speak directly. Could there be some inconvenient topic he doesn't want brought up? I couldn't read anything from Evelyn's expression. There were no signs of anything unusual. Please look forward to our wedding. I'm sure it will be a wonderful day for Evelyn's mother as well. We'll let you know once the details are settled. We'll be in touch. In other words, they intend to decide everything according to Christopher's family's wishes. I wonder what Evelyn thinks about all this. I tried to see her face, but it was hidden behind her hair, and I couldn't get a good look. Later, I would come to regret not making time to talk with her directly, even if I had to force the issue. A few days later, a letter arrived from Evelyn and Christopher. It was a notice about holding a dinner party for both families to meet before the wedding. It was my work's off-season, so I had some flexibility in my schedule. If they were planning to have the dinner party on that day, I could make arrangements to attend, and that would be fine. But I thought they could have at least consulted me before deciding on a date. Suppressing my lingering unease, I tried to contact Evelyn to confirm the details. I wanted to ask about the dress code, whether I should bring any gifts, and other small things. She must have been busy lately, as she hadn't even given me a single phone call. When I called, she finally picked up on the 10th ring, but Evelyn's voice was so soft I could barely hear her. Apparently, she was at work and couldn't talk on the phone. She said she would call back. Feeling bad for interrupting her work, I quickly hung up. But after that, there was no return call from Evelyn. Instead, rather oddly, Christopher called. Faith, did you receive the invitation to the dinner party? Yes, it arrived the day before yesterday. I tried calling Evelyn to discuss the dress code, gifts for Christopher's family, and such, but that girl. There's no need to go to such trouble. Just come as you normally would. That's all that matters. With that, the call ended. Evelyn seems to be busy, and I still haven't heard from her. Christopher keeps repeating the same polite, inoffensive things like, "Don't worry about it. Just come as you normally would." In the end, on the day of the dinner, I wore a plain blouse and slacks and brought a famous brand of cookies as a gift. I considered bringing some of my homemade wine, but I thought they might be surprised to receive wine from someone they were meeting for the first time, so I decided to save the wine gift for another occasion. When I entered the room where the dinner party was being held, everyone except me was already seated. Across from Evelyn sat Christopher, and next to him were people who seemed to be his parents. "Nice to meet you. I'm Melanie, Christopher's mother. I'm so happy to finally meet you." At first glance, her attire appeared plain, but each piece she wore was of high quality, and more than anything, her aura was different. Her dignified demeanor and flawless presence reminded me strangely of Christopher. "Nice to meet you. Well, I've always wanted a daughter. I'm so glad Evelyn is joining us. I heard she only had a mother, so I wondered what kind of girl she was. But I feel relieved now. Is this really the time to be saying such things?" Everything she says is irritating to listen to. Well, we're planning to have the wedding soon, and preparations are underway. It's sure to be the perfect day to celebrate the start of their life together. Look forward to it. Melanie seems unable to contain her excitement. Her husband just laughs with a ha ha ha, occasionally downing some alcohol, but doesn't seem to do much else. Oh, and about the wedding gift. Let's just forget about that sort of thing. Suddenly bringing up the topic of money, I was at a loss for how to respond when Melanie continued. "A wedding gift? Oh my, are you saying you won't let them marry without a gift? I can't believe there are still families like that these days. So, how much do you want?" I felt like Melanie was glaring at me. No, I hadn't even considered a wedding gift. We'll follow your wishes on that matter. She's covering her mouth with a handkerchief, but she can't hide her vulgar laughter. "And you'll have to give us a boy eventually, you know." Her outdated remark sent a shiver down my spine. Ever since that unpleasant dinner party, my desire to avoid seeing Christopher and his parents has only grown stronger by the day. 2 weeks after the dinner party, I received a message from Christopher. "We got married today." I wanted to hear the news directly from my daughter, but it seems Evelyn has quit her jobs to help out at the Garcia Hotel. She must be busy with her training as a hotel manager. Still, I had no idea the owners of Christopher's family, who run several hotels in this area as a hotel group, would be so high and mighty. I'll attend the wedding because I want to see Evelyn in all her glory. But after that, I'd rather keep my distance from them. Even after our first meeting, I still couldn't get through to Evelyn on the phone. She only sends a few messages late at night. No matter what I ask, all she says is, "I've been too busy to contact you. I'm sorry." Her short replies, like telegrams, only add to my anxiety. I managed to find out the date and location of the ceremony, but I don't know anything else. For someone about to get married, I don't sense any aura of happiness from her at all. Can the wedding really go smoothly like this? Even though Evelyn has always been somewhat plain, I thought she might show a glimmer of excitement or longing on her face for her wedding day. The day of the wedding arrived, with my unease still lingering. I attended Evelyn and Christopher's wedding and tried to find my seat, but it was nowhere to be found. While I was puzzling over this, the ceremony began. As I hurried towards the family seating area, Melanie approached me. "You poor woman can just stand and watch." It was so sudden that I couldn't comprehend what was happening. "I never said you could sit. And to think you'd try to sit in the family section." She looks down on me with an expression of utter disbelief. The people around us don't try to stop Melanie's behavior, they just watch. Some of them even have the gall to point their cameras at me, as if to say, "Oh, something interesting is happening." They seem to delight in the misfortune of others. I never thought I'd be subjected to this kind of treatment at my age. It's as if they anticipated my confusion and planned this whole thing. The other guests, who keep glancing at me out of the corners of their eyes to see my reaction, are all wearing matching ties or handkerchiefs. They have the Garcia Hotel Group logo on them, so they must be Melanie and Christopher's colleagues. I also spot people who seem to be connected to the Garcia Hotel, exchanging drinks while eyeing me. Looking closer, I realize it's wine from my own winery. The moment I saw that, I felt something snap inside me. Perhaps noticing my reaction, Evelyn gracefully stood up. As she rose from the stage, her posture was dignified and beautiful, and I found myself captivated by my own child. "Mom, let's go home." Evelyn approached me and called out. I stand up to join her. "Yes." I stepped forward from where I was standing, heading towards the stage. I thought I saw Christopher glance in our direction for a moment, but I couldn't care less anymore. There was only one place I needed to go. I grabbed a wine bottle from the drink bar next to the stage. The drink bar corner was set up for the guests. In addition to wine, there was beer and specialty fruit juices. Evelyn signaled to a nearby staff member and asked them to bring a large container. There was only one thing I had to do. I took the wines lined up at the drink bar one by one and moved them into the nearby container the staff had brought. Then I asked the venue staff to carry the entire container outside. "What are you doing?" "I won't allow you to do as you please." "Huh, Evelyn's mother. Do you want the alcohol that badly?" "Oh, I see. So that's how it is. If you can't get by without drinking cheap booze, then by all means, take it." I pulled out a slip of paper and a check from my bag. "I can't leave this wine with people like you who don't understand its value and don't appreciate it." I filled out the check I had in my bag with the regular price of the wine. I put my heart into making this for the ceremony. I'm so sorry it was completely out of place. What is the meaning of this? A poor person writing a check. Don't make me laugh. And what's this about putting your heart into making it? I haven't heard anything about that. Christopher was beside himself, making a pitiful scene, while Melanie glared at me from the family seating area, waving her handkerchief. But I no longer had anything to fear. As the parent who gave birth to this wine, I simply cannot leave it with people who don't understand its worth. It's too painful to watch, so I will buy it back. Huh, parent who gave birth to it. What are you talking about? The moment Melanie stopped waving the handkerchief in her frenzied state, I spoke out without a moment's hesitation. I'm the one who crafted this wine. As a winemaker, it's like my own child that I've poured my heart and soul into raising. I can't stand by and watch it being treated so terribly. And as Evelyn's mother, I can't endure this humiliation any longer. You're lying, right? That wine. Isn't it from the winery we always use at the hotel? I thought the winemaker was some old man. I'm working as the next generation winemaker. It's a shame that you are saying you have no interest in your business partners. The wine I was holding was the one I had brought as a gift for this wedding. It was a special, once-in-a-decade vintage. It was a wine I had created with the sole desire to make something worthy of celebrating my beloved daughter's wedding someday. It was one of the bottles I had crafted with a premium label and serial number, not available in regular stores or bars. The guests who seemed to know it had been made with a premium label started murmuring. Apparently, among wine enthusiasts, the wine I had crafted with Evelyn's wedding in mind was known as the Phantom Wine. There were a few people even in this venue who genuinely wanted to savor that wine. However, I'm sorry to say that as the winemaker who gave birth to this wine, and as a mother, I have convictions I cannot compromise. Faith, please calm down a bit. What do you mean, calm down? I mean, there are a lot of guests watching. For now, just calm down and take your seat. After telling me to take a seat, perhaps realizing that I didn't have one, he started whispering something to a nearby staff member. I could hear him clearly from where I was standing, instructing them to add a chair to the family seating area. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I'd like to know, why did you hold this wedding? I asked, looking Christopher straight in the eye. Well, a wedding is to announce your marriage to everyone who came, and then to express your gratitude to your parents. Like, we got married. Thank you for everything up until now. Oh, how wonderful. I'm so glad my boy grew up to be such a kind man. Melanie was expressing her joy without any regard for the people around her. I understand now what you mean. Hearing that, Christopher looked at me with a relieved expression and picked up the microphone. I'm glad Evelyn's mother understands. Now, please take your seat. We have the rest of the ceremony to get through. Christopher urged me to sit down as if nothing had happened. I couldn't comprehend what kind of nerve it would take to tell me to shut up and participate in the ceremony. At that moment, Evelyn stood up. I can't stand up anymore. She was staring straight at Christopher. Christopher pleads with Evelyn, as if seeking her help. Hey, Evelyn. Faith seems a bit worked up, so could you say something to her too? If this keeps up, it'll inconvenience the guests. As Christopher glances at the guest seating while saying this, Evelyn declares with an unwavering voice, I've decided that I cannot share my life with you. Besides, we're not even married yet. I apologize to all of you in attendance. With that, the guest seating area begins to buzz with chatter. Well, of course it would. Announcing that they're not even married yet at a wedding ceremony, a celebration of their new beginning. However, Evelyn carries herself with a dignified demeanor, as if she can't even hear the murmurs and whispers. As if to say she has no doubts about what she's done, Evelyn turns to face Christopher and starts speaking. Undaunted by the reactions around her, Evelyn continues. And this will serve as evidence, too. The rules of dormitory life. The photos sent to the guests and me are printouts labeled Dormitory Contract. I'm overwhelmed by the content that reads like school regulations. It details minute rules of daily life, penalties, how to spend days off, and so on. When you showed me around the hotel, I thought something was off about the employees' behavior. I never imagined it was because of these rules, though. Looking through the photos Evelyn sent, I see company mottos and regulations that are unthinkable in this day and age. Smartphones collected during work hours. Computers and smartphones in the dormitory require permission. Use of social media prohibited. And so on. Even high school students these days wouldn't be able to put up with this. In other words, you make sure inconvenient truths don't get out to the public. In fact, you've been manipulating the books as you please, so you can't talk your way out of it. No, that's a misunderstanding. It's truly her misunderstanding. At this, Evelyn cuts him off with a look that says she can't bear to listen, and places accessories like necklaces and brooches, as well as her purse, in front of Christopher. I thought the Garcia Hotel's online reviews were too good to be true, but to think it's because you've been silencing your employees. Trying to boost sales through such underhanded manipulation is despicable. No, just hear me out. Let's hear this first, shall we? Evelyn plays a recording app on her smartphone. You can't even do something like this? What's wrong with you? I could send you back to your parents' place. You were using your smartphone without permission in the middle of the night, weren't you? If you can't focus on your work, are you going to quit? But if you leave this hotel, you won't be able to find work anywhere else with your skills. Melanie and Christopher's intimidating scolding continues. Hey, can I dock this girl's pay? Rather than paying a useless person like her, it'd be far more meaningful to add it to Christopher's allowance. Oh, of course. Let Christopher buy whatever he likes. I'm sick of even looking at this waitress's face. Melanie and Christopher's yelling goes on and on. What will you do if more people find out about this? Christopher and Melanie are struck speechless, frozen in place. Christopher then looks at us with an expression that seems to plead for mercy. However, considering everything that's happened, we can't afford to go easy on him. Hey, back when we first met, there was a time when you gave me gifts like accessories, remember? Why did you give me those presents? Well, you see, I was desperate to catch Evelyn's attention, so. Then do you remember saying this? She takes out a wallet, necklace, and brooch from her pouch, clearly high-end items at a glance, and places them on the table before asking. I'm pretty sure you said, with just a little effort on my part, buying something like this is a piece of cake, didn't you? In an instant, the color drains from Christopher's face. What? No way, that must have been. It was obviously a joke. I wish it had been a joke too, but it wasn't, was it? Evelyn operates her smartphone and sends images to the guests' smartphones. You used this money to buy gifts for me, right? The books from this period look suspicious. Suspicious? That must be your imagination. It looks like you've been falsifying the books quite a bit, not just during this period. I noticed after I started dating you and was made to work under the guise of hotel manager training. Christopher and Melanie turned pale. I thought, wow, they're keeping pretty sloppy books. And then you launched a gift strategy to win me over as your prospective wife? Even from a distance, it's clear that the color is gradually draining from their faces. It must be something serious. Hey, what do these numbers represent? Evelyn holds out a ledger book right in front of Christopher. Huh? What's this? And why does Evelyn have this notebook? It's the calculation ledger. You insisted on doing it on paper and writing everything by hand in a notebook, remember? I flipped through the notebook in my hands, and stop on a certain page. Who was it that pushed this on me, saying, to become a hotel manager in the future, you need to be able to read a book or two? No, that's not what I meant by that. Melanie tries to make excuses in a noticeably high-pitched voice. In other words, Melanie must have known about Christopher's embezzlement and extravagant spending too. This. There's no talking your way out of this. No way. The notebook contained detailed records of the flow of money. The amounts here and there don't match up, and the sheer size of these amounts isn't normal. Look, you just need to write these things down roughly. A ballpark figure is fine. Evelyn doesn't understand that balance, so she tries to do it too meticulously and fails. Christopher speaks to me with a know-it-all attitude. Just so you know, I used to work in accounting, so I can't turn a blind eye to these money flows. If I overlook these small discrepancies, it'll come back to bite me later. I shove the notebook back at Christopher. No, you can't judge our hotel based solely on the notebook of some company's accountant. What? Are you serious? Even Christopher, as bold as he is, seemed to realize he couldn't continue this conversation any further. He finally shut his mouth. Falsifying money, using it for entertainment, wasting it. It's absolutely unforgivable. That's why, when you told me to issue a marriage license, I actually tore it up and threw it away. What? No matter how excellent someone may be, no matter how distinguished their family background, I don't want to become family with someone who falsifies money and causes others to feel distrust and unease. Evelyn said all of this in one breath and then left the venue. That's my daughter for you. She has a strong core. Alarmed by this, Christopher timidly approached me. Hey, Evelyn was just joking earlier, right? Surely she wouldn't say she's not getting married after all. Not after holding such a grand wedding ceremony, right? What are you talking about? I asked, looking Christopher in the eye. I mean, come on. If she gets married now, and married to me at that, she'll be set for life. And if she says, never mind, I'm calling it off, here and now, wouldn't that be fraud? Christopher looks at me with a smug expression. I respect my daughter's thoughts and decisions. It's not about it being a wedding ceremony or not. About 10 minutes after Evelyn said to me, Mom, let's go home, Melanie had become half crazed. Who do you think we are? Enough with the disrespect. You're just a lowly winemaker. The easygoing smile from before had vanished from Melanie's face as she became hysterical. I've decided not to do business with those I can't trust, so if you'll excuse me. In the end, it was decided that there would be no further dealings with the Garcia Hotel. I don't want to supply the wine I poured my heart into making to a place that treats it so carelessly. And it seems Evelyn was able to properly say goodbye to Christopher. When they first started dating, she apparently thought Christopher was wonderful, but halfway through, she seemed to come to her senses. When you're actually in that environment, it can be hard to notice that something's off, even when it is. I have experience with that myself. But there's nothing good about being in an environment where you can't cherish yourself. Evelyn seemed to realize that through this experience, and I'm really glad. It put my mind at ease. Mom, I'm sorry for causing you so much trouble. It's okay. I'm just glad you realized it. And I never imagined the wine I made would be treated like that either. Since the day she fled the Garcia Hotel and broke up with Christopher, Evelyn has been working hard on her job hunt. Luckily, she quickly found a new workplace and seems to be living fulfilling days now. As for me, I'm still devoted to making wine, as always. This year, We're launching a new series for the first time in several years, so the winery is extremely busy day and night. There's no time to relax, but I think it's fine because it's enjoyable in its own way. Plus, this is the first time I'm serving as the face of the brand for a new series launch, so there's that pressure too. Delicate wines crafted by a female winemaker. With that concept, I'm determined to pour everything I've got into it. The product concept and aim were spot on, and the wine I produced became a huge hit. When I started appearing more in magazines, brochures, and sometimes even on TV, the thing I feared happened. Right after I got to work, a male employee who had arrived earlier stopped me. Apparently, a woman was sitting down at the entrance for visitors. According to him, she refused to budge until she met with me. Got it. I'll go check it out. When I went to the visitor entrance, I found the last person I expected. You finally came. As expected, a popular female winemaker is on a different level. Don't think you can do business as usual around here after humiliating me. I've been doing business with this winery since the previous generation. I could agree to a big contract with you again, you know. The two were talking big, but they looked much shabbier than the last time I saw them. Their clothes had lint, stains, and frays that were noticeable even from a distance, making them look pitiful. Hey, are you listening? I thought you might be in trouble since you can't do business with the Garcia Hotel anymore, so I'm reaching out to you. How about you give me an answer? If you just bow your head now, I'm saying I'll do business with you like before. You know what'll happen if you waste this chance, don't you? I took a breath and said to them, you are neither affiliates nor customers. And of course, I'd like you to refrain from such nuisance behavior in the future. At that, Melanie grabbed my shoulder with such force that it seemed she might attack me at any moment. That's quite a way to talk. Do you understand your position? Someone who hasn't received a proper education couldn't possibly know how to speak properly, could they, Mom? Besides, an old, run-down winery like this is bound to fail soon anyway. I'm appalled by their outrageous attitude, but if I leave them unchecked, they'll just repeat the same things. I was aware that you were loitering around the employee entrance and peering inside from the visitor entrance many times. And of course, I also know you took products from the souvenir shop for winery tour guests. No, that was, well, it was so terrible that I consulted the police. When we installed security cameras, we got solid evidence of your numerous nuisance behaviors. With this much evidence, I'm sure you two intelligent individuals can understand. When I said that and turned to them, their faces were paler than I'd ever seen before. No, that's such an underhanded trick. The two seemed determined not to apologize. It's easy to imagine that their pride won't allow them to apologize because they look down on me. Well, I guess it can't be helped. For now, I need to get back to work. Then, for today, I'll take my leave here. With that, I walked away from the two and returned to my workplace. Afterward, I took the security camera footage, recorded conversations as evidence, and the shoplifting history to the police for consultation. As a result, Melanie and Christopher's actions were deemed malicious, and they now have a criminal record. Naturally, this also tarnishes the name of the Garcia Hotel Group. The hotel industry has been in a tough situation due to factors like the decline in travelers. But this latest trouble with the management seems to have made things even worse. With the flood of low ratings on review sites, it's likely only a matter of time before they go under. But that has nothing to do with me. I'm finally free from the problems with Melanie and Christopher, and have regained a peaceful life. As a producer, I'm truly happy that the wine I made has generated a lot of buzz, caught the eye of international travelers, and become an even more popular product. Not only have shipments increased, but the winery's name recognition has also gone up, making me even more enthusiastic about my work going forward. From now on, I intend to work even harder to ensure that many people seeking this flavor can enjoy the wine I create.
One day at the airport, on my way back from work, I ran into an old classmate. It was Donald, a guy who had made my life miserable from middle school through high school. Because of Donald, I was pushed to the point of dropping out of high school. His personality hadn't changed even as an adult. Upon seeing me, he immediately demeaned me as the dropout loser. I almost lost it at that moment, but I managed to control my anger and walked away. Later, Donald and I would run into each other again at the airport. "Hey, dropout, this is what an airplane looks like," he said with a malicious smile. When it was revealed that I was the captain, his reaction made me surprised. "My name is Brian, a 38-year-old bachelor." Saying I'm a pilot might make it sound like I followed a path of elite success, but in reality, I dropped out of high school once. I had been subjected to insidious bullying from middle to high school. The start of it all was a fallout with a classmate, Donald. Donald was outgoing, friendly, and popular with everyone. In contrast, my only merit was being serious, and while I did okay in studies, I was bad at socializing. So when Donald, who had been on the same soccer team in elementary and joined the soccer club with me, approached me early on, I was overjoyed. The initial connection was our shared history with soccer. In our group, I was always the butt of the jokes. My inability to deflect the teasing only served as more fodder for Donald's charm and, simultaneously, his cruelty. Initially, I preferred being teased over being alone, accepting my place in the group. I even found joy in making others laugh with my reactions. However, the dynamics slowly began to distort. The way laughter was garnered in the group gradually escalated. At first, I rationalized it as part of friendship dynamics. But perhaps my laughter encouraged it. The jokes gradually turned into blatant mockery and personal attacks. Sometimes, they would half-jokingly apply wrestling moves on me. "Stop it," I would say with a laugh, but no one would ever stop Donald. Instead, everyone laughed while watching us, making me realize I wasn't entertaining them, I was the entertainment. He was just enjoying humiliating me. After that realization, being part of the group became a torment. The teasing I had once brushed off laughingly became unbearable. Walking down the hallway one day, I was smacked on the head as usual. Normally, I'd just laugh it off saying, "What's that for?" But that day, "Stop it," I clearly told him. Then, "What's with you? You're not fun anymore." He made a displeased face and said, "Just because you're in the group doesn't mean you can't look like you're enjoying it." "It's impossible. I'm not having fun." "Huh? What's that supposed to mean? You were always laughing. And who do you think you are, Brian, acting all high and mighty?" he said in a low, intimidating voice, glaring at me. I glared back at him without backing down. He said, "Whatever," and walked away, quickly blending back into the group. From the next day, my life turned into hell. Arriving at school in the morning, not only Donald and the members he incited, but even unrelated classmates began to ignore me. Being ignored was still bearable, but soon they started actively harassing me. He was always the ringleader. At first, I stubbornly continued showing up at school and club activities, but eventually, the pain became too much to bear, and I started missing them. Entering the 9th grade, the stress of exams coupled with their behavior became even more vicious. Having missed nearly half of the 9th grade, my grades inevitably plummeted. I had been considered a candidate for one of the top high schools in the county back in the 8th grade, but now I found myself in a situation where I could only aim for schools 2 or 3 tiers lower. Still, I thought I could escape this situation by graduating middle school, so I tried to focus on my studies. But, as expected, I couldn't concentrate, and worst of all, I ended up going to the same high school as Donald. Up until middle school, Mr. Richard, a teacher, had taken a personal interest in helping me out, scolding Donald and the others, which made things somewhat bearable. The hell continued into high school. Trying to establish new relationships in high school, I ended up in the same class as Donald. "Hey, there's Brian," Donald declared, grabbing my collar in front of everyone as I walked into the classroom. "Let's all tease him. He loved being teased by everyone in middle school, right?" The classmates initially seemed skeptical, but once they decided I was someone they could disdain, they became endlessly cruel, characteristic of kids this age. Unlike in middle school, there was no teacher willing to protect me. Eventually, my spirit broke, and before I knew it, I couldn't bring myself to go to school anymore. Failing to meet the attendance requirements, I was held back a year, which led to me dropping out of high school. The one who tried to save me was Mr. Richard, my middle school teacher. He was the only teacher who noticed my situation and reached out to me. Not only did he scold Donald and the others, but during the exam period, he let me use his room as a refuge to escape from them. After school, I used to head to his room every day to vent my frustrations. During the 9th grade, when my attendance dropped and I fell behind in studies, he tutored me closely. Unfortunately, despite Mr. Richard's efforts, Donald and his crew's behavior never changed, but I believe he did everything he could. He was my only ally and support at school. Just having him there was like what got me through middle school. Mr. Richard, who was always concerned about me, kept in touch through letters even after graduation. But after continuing to face the same treatment in high school and losing the will to attend, I couldn't bring myself to reply to his letters. One day, he came to my house to apologize in person. "I'm really sorry, I couldn't be there for you when you needed it," he said. When Mr. Richard found out I had stopped going to high school, he brought over loads of information about correspondence high schools and night schools. "Why not start over in a new environment?" "It's useless. I'm useless." My self-esteem was damaged to the limit by being ridiculed repeatedly by Donald and the others. Mr. Richard encouraged me, saying, "Brian, you'll be fine. You'll get what you deserve if the environment changes." Driven by his passion, I began studying for the GED program through distance learning. I never really hated studying, and with the active support from my parents and Mr. Richard, my studies progressed unbelievably well. Frustrated with myself for breaking under harassment, I refused to let those guys ruin my life and immersed myself in my studies. At that time, my parents, noticing my hard work but also cautioning against overdoing it, took me on a trip for a break. That was when I first boarded an airplane. What surprised me first was the imposing presence of the aircraft before boarding. I remembered how I used to love looking at vehicles in encyclopedias as a kid, especially aircraft. Then, flying in the sky, I was completely captivated by the world above. The gradually receding view of the city, the thrill of breaking through clouds, and the clear skies beyond. The beauty seen from the airplane's window made me feel freed from everything. It was a refreshing view that seemed to erase all the entanglements and regrets over my past failures. "I want to fly freely in the sky. I want to be a pilot." This vague idea became a solid determination by the time we returned from the trip. It was the first time I had a dream, and I felt my heart leap for the first time in a while. Becoming a pilot is not an easy path. It would be a burden on my parents. But I didn't want to give up on something again. While I was struggling with these thoughts, Mr. Richard visited me again. "Look at you, Brian, you seem a lot happier." He noticed my change immediately. "How's your study going?" "It's going really well lately. I've found a goal." He looked at me encouragingly. I feared being laughed at, or being told it was impossible for me. For a moment, such thoughts crossed my mind, but then I reminded myself that Mr. Richard would never do that. And then, I gathered my courage and spoke up. "I've thought about becoming a pilot." Mr. Richard's eyes widened, tears welling up in them. Seeing his face light up with joy almost made me cry too. "That's great. I'll support you. Finding a goal is a wonderful thing. Go for it," he said with a trembling voice, taking my hand. His words solidified my resolve. After that, I talked to my parents about wanting to become a pilot. My mother, Karen, looked a bit worried, but my father, Thomas, said, "That's great. I thought you've been looking more determined lately, so this was the reason. I'll support you with all I have." Then, "Yes, we will." My mother nodded. Afterward, I studied hard, passed the GED program and the aviation school exams. I worked diligently on my studies and training in aviation school and finally obtained my pilot's license. But I wasn't satisfied just yet. Aiming to be a better pilot, I won a recommendation for graduate school, where I studied cutting-edge aviation. The thesis I wrote there received higher praise than I had expected, paving the way for my doctoral studies. After earning my doctorate, I finally felt a sense of accomplishment. Though I considered staying abroad for work, I decided to return home for my parents waiting in my hometown. Back home, I got a job as a pilot with an airline company. One day, while walking to the airport exit in my casual clothes, a man in dirty overalls called out to me. I recognized his face immediately and was struck speechless. It was Donald, unforgettable, who had made my middle and high school years hell. "Look who it is, long time no see. The dropout loser who quit high school. What are you doing here? Guess you're a janitor or something. Got anything to say, dropout Brian?" I was traumatized, forgetting where I was as my mind went blank. His tone, attitude, and expression. It brought back memories of those hellish school days. Amused by my frozen state, Donald mentioned he was working here as a mechanic. He seemed to think I was a janitor or something, his attitude clearly dismissive. There seemed to be no remorse for nearly crushing a person. "You have no idea the pain you caused me." I almost lost my composure but managed to hold back my anger and simply said, "Well then, good luck," and quickly left the scene. Even after Donald was out of sight, my heart continued to beat uncomfortably for a while. Later, as the shock of that encounter began to fade, I received a call from a familiar person. It was Mr. Richard. Apparently, hearing about my achievements, Mr. Richard decided it wasn't too late to pursue his dream of graduate studies and had finally been accepted into a prestigious university in England. When I was genuinely happy for him. "There's something I'd like to ask you," he said. "I'll be flying to England, and I'd love to be on a plane piloted by you." Of course. I readily agreed, and then did everything I could to secure the pilot's seat for Mr. Richard's flight. The day of departure arrived. It was very cold, and I was walking around the aircraft for an external check, wearing a jacket over my captain's uniform. Then, I encountered Donald again. Everyone was at their posts, leaving him and me alone. Seeing me, Donald laughed and pretended to hit me with a tool. I flinched, and he said, "What, got scared? It's just a joke," with the same immaturity as before. "Hey, dropout, this is what an airplane looks like." Donald sneered openly, when a voice called from behind me. "Captain!" It was Susan, one of the cabin attendants. "Captain?" Donald looked confused, but Susan called out to me directly. "Captain, it's time for the flight. Please prepare." Understood. "I'll be right there." Leaving a stunned Donald behind, I quickly made my way to Susan. Donald clicked his tongue behind me, but I felt a sense of vindication, almost like I had won something. Soon it was time to board, and the passengers began to enter the plane one by one. Seeing Mr. Richard among them made me smile involuntarily. Soon, all the passengers were seated, and the hatch was sealed. As the captain, I introduced myself and promised a safe journey through the skies to all passengers. I was sure Mr. Richard could hear my voice too. Thinking this made me feel even prouder to be piloting as a captain. Donald was a thing of the past. I can't forget the humiliation, but I'm not the same person I was back then. Reminding myself of this, I prepared to take off. The plane took off without a hitch. But then, an unexpected event occurred. A message from the control tower informed us of a sudden change in weather. Almost immediately, the plane was hit by a terrible storm. The aircraft shook violently in the blowing wind. It was an extraordinary shaking, unlike anything normal. Panic ensued inside, and amidst the chaos of reports coming through my headphones, I felt a moment of confusion. But I haven't accumulated over 10 years of experience for nothing. Plus, this situation closely resembled something I had written about in my thesis. Calm down. It's okay. I can do this after all the hard work I've put in. I collaborated with the co-pilot and cabin crew to ensure the aircraft's safety and to calm the panic. Soon, we managed to escape the dire situation. The aircraft gradually stabilized. When we safely landed and saw the airport, I felt a wave of relief, but the job wasn't done yet. As the captain, I apologized for the incident and then wished all passengers and crew success in their future endeavors before finishing my duties. Of course, the image of one particular mentor crossed my mind. Later, the details of the malfunction that had troubled the aircraft were revealed. It turned out that a certain part was damaged. Despite thorough double checks, I wondered why the maintenance had been neglected. When the authorities analyzed the camera footage, it was revealed to be Donald's doing. The malfunction was intentional. Initially denying the accusations, Donald's face flushed the moment I appeared. Noticing something was off, everyone turned their gaze towards me. I summarized my relationship with Donald. It's all in the past. How long will you hold on to it? That's why you're foolish. My impromptu remark seemed to make Donald realize he had dug his own grave. He tried to deny it hastily, but it was too late. The gaze of everyone present turned towards Donald. I'm not the timid person I used to be. Looking Donald in the eye, I made it clear. The one who's been holding on to the past is you. You intended this as harassment against me, but do you realize how many lives you endangered with your actions? Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? Prompted by my words, those present began to voice their criticism towards him. Donald, looking pale and shrinking away, eventually broke down and apologized, but that couldn't erase the crime he committed. He admitted his guilt, faced disciplinary action, and was criminally charged, leading to his dismissal. His actions, both past and present, certainly cannot be forgiven. However, I couldn't help but feel pity for Donald, who had driven himself to this point by fixating on and trying to sabotage another person. A few days later, Susan and I went out for a meal together. Susan had invited me, asking, "Would you like to go out for a meal together on our next day off?" Being an excellent cabin attendant, Susan always looked dignified and beautiful, but in her casual clothes, she seemed even more so. I had secretly been attracted to her for a long time, but I had nearly given up on the idea, thinking that someone 8 years my junior could never be interested in me. However, our relationship rapidly grew closer following that incident. Could it be the suspension bridge effect? No, maybe it's slightly different. As I was eating, pondering over such thoughts. "Brian, you were really cool the other day," Susan said. I was at a loss for words, and Susan smiled softly. "What do you mean?" "When there was trouble, you gave calm instructions, right? Thanks to you, I was able to act calmly too. It was wonderful." It was an embarrassing compliment, but I feel responsible for involving so many people in my problem with Donald. That humble side of you is also wonderful. Are you teasing me? Not at all. Susan covered her mouth with her hand and smiled gently. Her surprising statements didn't end there. "I'm the type to make a move on someone I'm interested in," she said. I was stunned. I could feel my face turning red. Then, Susan and I started dating. We both travel a lot for work, in the sky or abroad, but she always wanted to go overseas even in her private time. I also love flying, so traveling together is a great joy. France, Canada, Vietnam, Hawaii. We've made many memories in various places with her. Each time, I felt the wounds in my heart healing. I'm planning to propose to her soon. I intend to invite Mr. Richard to our wedding. It must be the strange connection that he helped forge. That's what I felt. This time, give the baby to your brother. You can just have another one. After I announced my pregnancy to my parents, my mother uttered those unbelievable words. Brother Zach and his wife Rosie, who is infertile, demanded that I give up my child for adoption to them. My parents have always prioritized Zach over everything and neglected me. The hopeful future I had envisioned upon conceiving my first child turned into despair. My name is Olivia. I've been married to my husband Walt for 3 years. Our marriage is great, and we've been talking like we want a child soon. However, I've kept some distance from my family home. The reason lies with my parents and my brother Zach. At the family home, my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie live together. Zach was a prodigy since childhood and graduated from a prestigious university. He now secured a job at a major corporation. He is set to join and eventually take over our father's company. Our parents have adored him since he was young. In comparison, I wasn't very smart and had average looks, so I don't have many memories of being cherished by our parents. From a young age, I was always confused by the difference in treatment between Zach and me, often feeling down alone. Especially our mother, she was always with him, clearly showing he was her favorite. As for me, she mostly ignored me. When she did talk, it was usually to put me down. Perhaps influenced by our parents, Zach looked down on me too, so we never had a good sibling relationship. I felt I had no place at home and grew increasingly isolated. For those reasons, as soon as I graduated high school, I left home. My parents, seemingly uninterested in me, didn't say much when I announced my departure. In fact, they seemed almost pleased. After leaving, I got a job. And 3 years later, I married Walt, who was a classmate from high school. I was eager to build my own family and find my peace, away from the influence of my family. I only return home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'd rather not go, but my parents insist. They worry about appearances, and a daughter who never visits would look bad. They make a fuss if I don't go, so I endure it and visit twice a year. I went back grudgingly this Thanksgiving, but my mother was as cold as ever. You and your husband are still so unimpressive. It ruins the festive mood. She started with her sarcasm right away. She called us back only to say such things. If she's going to be like this, she shouldn't bother calling. I thought, while fending off her sarcasm, but her barbs continued. We're worried about you. You two live in poverty. We always think you'll come begging for money. My family home is quite wealthy. But since leaving, I've never asked for financial help and have been living off our own earnings with Walt. We manage a decent life and even celebrate their birthdays properly. There's no way we would do that. I immediately responded to her baseless accusation. However, she blurted out, "But you two are still low income, aren't you?" And then shifted her gaze to Walt beside me. Walt, you're still working at that detective agency, right? How long do you plan to keep doing that shady business? Don't you feel embarrassed? Indeed, Walt works as a detective, something she always ridicules. She sees detective work as shady and inferior to regular jobs. While Walt was explaining his job to make it understandable for her, Zach chimed in. Mom, it's pointless to even listen to that. Detective work is shady, something nobody wants to get involved in. It's a low-level job done by people beneath us. The salary must be nothing compared to mine. Flaunting his elitism, Zach looked down on detective work, just like her. That is something we've been hearing since we got married. Walt remained silent, but I felt angry that his job was being completely dismissed. Walt has been my confidant since our student days, so he understands what my family is like. Therefore, he always accompanies me when we have to visit my parents, not wanting to leave me alone. Even though he knows he'll be subjected to unpleasantness, I still feel terribly guilty. This visit, like others, ended up being an unpleasant experience. We resolved to live modestly together, not bothered by my family. Around that time, something wonderful happened. In our 3rd year of marriage, I finally became pregnant. I was overjoyed to be expecting our first child. Considering the way my parents always disparaged me, I felt I couldn't keep my pregnancy a secret from them. So, I visited my family home to announce it. It had been a while since I visited outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie were there. The response to my announcement was unexpected. Upon hearing my news, my mother suddenly raised her voice. "How dare you say such a thing in front of Zach?" I was surprised by her reaction. I hadn't expected congratulations, but this was unexpected. I was puzzled by her reference to Zach, and as I tilted my head in confusion, she revealed a shocking truth. "Zach can't have children, due to Rosie's constitution. How could you be so insensitive with your announcement?" I had no idea that they were infertile. Stunned by her unexpected words, I turned to look at the two. Zach looked uncomfortable and resigned. Meanwhile, Rosie was looking down solemnly. "You dare have a child before Zach. If it weren't for Rosie, this wouldn't have happened." She sighed dramatically, glancing back and forth between Rosie and me. Observing that, Zach intervened. "You know, Rosie feels guilty enough as it is. Don't be too hard on her, Mom." I was a bit surprised to hear he defend Rosie. From my occasional visits, I knew that his attitude towards Rosie was never that kind. "You're really kind, Zach. Rosie, if it weren't for being Zach's wife, you'd have been divorced long ago." Hearing Zach's words, our mother glared at Rosie. Indeed, knowing them, they might have divorced Rosie immediately upon learning of her infertility. But perhaps Zach does have some affection for his wife. I pondered that as I watched he calm our mother down. "Well, I've made my announcement, so I'll be heading home." The atmosphere had turned to blaming Rosie because of my announcement, so I decided to leave quickly. But then, my mother turned to me and said something unbelievable. "The baby you're having, give it to Zach." "What?" I couldn't help but exclaim in shock at her outrageous suggestion. "What does she mean, give my baby to Zach?" "You can have another child since you're capable of having one. Since Rosie seems unable to. So giving that baby to Zach as an adopted child will bring peace to our family." Peace? What is she talking about? How could they think of taking my baby for him, just because he can't have children? That's absurd and unjustifiable. When I insisted I would never agree to such a thing, my mother retorted, "Look, this is our long-awaited first grandchild. I'll let it grow around me. It's only right that we get to raise it. Zach will take over the company, so we will raise the baby." She made such infuriating arguments, planning to take away my unborn child just to ensure a successor for our father's company. She talked about the process of adoption as if she had researched it, but I was too furious to listen. Seeing how irritated I was, Zach added something unbelievable. "Well, since Rosie can't have children, it's good for her that you got pregnant at this time. At least you're finally contributing to this family." I couldn't believe it, but Zach seemed to agree with her. Even our father, who usually says nothing, nodded in agreement from behind them. It seemed the whole family was ready to claim my baby as their own. I couldn't believe how casually Zach spoke such terrible words to his own wife, acting as if nothing was wrong. Realizing that talking further was pointless, I decided to leave immediately. They only said, "Make sure to give us an answer next time you come," and didn't even come out to see me off. Only Rosie, who must have been deeply hurt, silently saw me off. Even after returning home, my anger didn't subside. Far from celebrating my pregnancy, they made an unreasonable and absurd demand. Thinking about the future made me feel gloomy. They would probably keep pushing for adoption after the baby was born. Walt was also shocked when he heard the story from me after returning from work. Even he was at a loss for words. He understands my family, but the situation being beyond belief. A few days later, we had an unexpected visitor at home. "What brings you here so suddenly? It's rare to see you alone." It was Rosie. She looked haggard, her skin lacked luster, and her hair was disheveled. As she looked at us, her eyes brimmed with tears. "Olivia, I'm so sorry about the other day." She must be referring to when I went to announce my pregnancy. It wasn't her fault though. She seemed to feel guilty about the unreasonable demands made by my family. Then, she began to speak about something unexpected. Actually, I have something I want to talk to you about. What could it be? I invited her in to hear her out. What she revealed was shocking, and my anger surged again. Trying hard to suppress her anger, she calmly told me a significant truth. Walt had been quietly listening to our conversation, but spoke up as our talk wound down, saying, "Actually," and revealed information to me. It was as astonishing and infuriating as Rosie's confession. Although Rosie had been listening to Walt's story, her teared up again. Having been informed of this significant fact by Walt and Rosie, I made a decision. To punish my parents and Zach. I swore to myself to settle past grievances and seek revenge. 3 months later, my belly beginning to show, I visited my family home with Walt. There were my parents, Zach, and Rosie. You've decided to give the baby to Zach, right? My mother asked, without even a greeting. It seemed she could only think of my baby being adopted by Zach. I told you before, that's not going to happen. As I responded, my parents glared at me, as if they couldn't accept it. No matter what you say, we're taking that baby. Stop being so stubborn. My mother appeared infuriated by my resistance. Feeling the same way, Zach and my father just glared at me without stopping her. No matter how much you yell, I will never give the baby away. Instead, I came today to show something to you guys. Is that okay, Rosie? I said, then made eye contact with Rosie. She nodded, still looking into my eyes. Rosie intends to divorce Zach. And the reason is this. I pulled several photos from an envelope I had brought. That was my purpose for coming today. These are... Seeing the photos, Zach was speechless. The photos showed Zach kissing another woman and entering a hotel, undeniable evidence of his infidelity. Apparently shocked to have been photographed. He muttered just one sentence. Who the hell took these photos? Our parents, standing next to Zach, looked bewildered and alternated their gaze between him and me. They probably had no idea that he was having an affair. It was Walt who took these. What? Yes, Walt had taken the photos. Walt had been silently watching that unfold, but began to explain how he came to take the photos. As a detective, he had incidentally seen Zach walking in downtown with an unknown woman while investigating a case. Out of curiosity, he conducted his own investigation and discovered that Zach was having an affair with that woman by pretending to be single. The decisive moment was captured in those photos. Zach seemed to think he had cleverly kept his affair secret. He was dumbfounded and at a loss for words. Adultery is a valid reason for divorce. Make sure you pay Rosie a proper compensation. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Zach spoke. I got stuck with a wife who's so incompetent. It's okay to have a little fun outside, right? Rosie and I were speechless. Instead of apologizing, he blamed Rosie for his infidelity. That's right, you're right. Rosie, it's because you're incompetent. To think you're acting all high and mighty about divorce. Our mother joined in, supporting his retort. They were desperately trying to blame Rosie, probably not wanting to be at a disadvantage themselves. I guess after I left, she must have been treated coldly by this family, just like I was. Thinking about it made me feel terribly sorry for her. Therefore, I decided to confront this family today. To save myself and Rosie, who had been neglected all that time, I pushed them further into a corner by blaming Rosie. Zach, you made fun of Walt, but the investigative skills of a professional detective are extraordinary. As soon as he started investigating, evidence kept piling up. And then, we found out something shocking about your mistress. Saying that, I saw my parents tensing up, wondering what shocking fact would come out next. The woman you're having an affair with seems to be the daughter of a mafia boss. As soon as I revealed it, Zach stiffened as if frozen. He must not have known that. Immediately, my mother screamed. What? Is that true? Her beloved son's mistress being the daughter of a mafia boss. Upon knowing the full extent of the shocking truth, she collapsed to the ground, covering her face with both hands. My father also pressed his head with both hands, as if he had heard something terrifying. Zach, you were pretending to be single while dating her, correct? Right, he had hidden his marital status to have an affair with the woman. If she finds out that she's been deceived by a married man, what do you think will happen? What will her parents do when they learn their daughter was tricked by a married man? It would be better to tell them, right? With my threatening words, now clearly realizing the identity of the woman he had been deceiving, Zach started to panic. No! I didn't know either. I was deceived too. Our parents, domineering just a moment ago, were now completely confused by this unforeseen revelation. Then, Rosie began to speak in front of the flustered. You didn't just deceive your mistress, did you? With her words, tension returned to the room. Then, she repeated what she had told me during her visit. You are infertile, aren't you? At that moment, Zach's face showed an "oh no" expression. Our parents looked at him in shock. They had blamed Rosie for not being able to have a baby, but the cause was actually Zach himself. Did you know, Rosie? That was all he could manage to say. The stunned parents were visibly shaken by the harsh impact. As they struggled to find their next words, Rosie delivered the final blow. I found it accidentally while cleaning the room. Rosie had stumbled upon his infertility diagnosis, hidden in his desk drawer. He couldn't admit that to his doting parents, so he kept that fact a secret and blamed infertility on Rosie. Believing his words, our parents had blamed Rosie. His protective comments about Rosie when I announced my pregnancy were probably due to his guilt over the issue. Being blamed for not being able to have a baby, I suffered every day. And the talk turned to taking Olivia's child. I was just so sad. Rosie declared that with a calm and unchanged expression. In contrast, my parents had just learned the shocking truth and were in a panic. To think Zach will never have a baby, that's just... My mother was despairing at the reality of not being able to hold his child. But in the next moment, she turned her hysterical hatred towards him. You knew it was your fault, yet you pushed all the blame onto your wife. Did you cheat with other women just because you knew you were infertile? How could my son be so low? Oh dear, why did this happen? She vented her frustration at him. Hearing it, he finally spoke and started his pitiful explanation. I was shocked to find out I was infertile. I felt guilty for not giving you two a grandchild. When I found out Olivia was pregnant with a boy, it just seemed convenient. It was a story that made me feel utterly contemptuous. Shaking off my anger, I delivered the final blow to the three. Your selfish actions hurt Rosie and me. Besides, you have an affair with such a dangerous person. Zach, Mom, and Dad, you all better brace yourselves for what's coming. You guys have hurt so many people, now you'll get what you deserve. Hearing my words, they started apologizing to us, their earlier bravado gone. Where did the momentum go when you asked me to give up my son? I looked at the three of them with disdain, like looking at trash. Beside me, Rosie said nothing and just stared ahead. Her silence spoke volumes about the depth of her sorrow. Zach and my parents were in for tough times ahead. The father of Zach's mistress learned about the affair, and the three of them were summoned and had to apologize repeatedly. Although they managed to break off the affair, Zach was forced to pay a hefty compensation because he had deceived the woman. The amount was staggering, and they learned the hard way the dangers of entanglement with such people. Because of that, my family home soon fell into disarray. My father was forced to resign as company president due to the public scandal. My mother became isolated, seen with disdain by the neighbors, and withdrew into herself. The relationship between my parents became hostile, constantly arguing over Zach. Zach was forced to leave his job after the scandal leaked to his company. As if to add insult to injury, his divorce with Rosie was finalized. Losing his job and having to pay compensation to Rosie, Zach was trapped in a life of relentless work. Around the time Rosie successfully left the family home, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both the baby and I were in good health, and I savored the joy of welcoming a new life. The happy days for our family of three began. Then, Walt and I decided to cut all ties with my family. I had been torn about severing ties with such parents and brother, but that incident made me realize it was best for my son. Even without them, I have an irreplaceable family now. I've decided to cherish only my precious family from now on. I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed. I could hear the mocking laughter over the phone. But I didn't let out a surprised sound. I thought if I played into their hands, it would weaken my position. And by now, I had not an iota of love left for my husband, Zach. Okay, brace yourself. I replied calmly, but inside, anger was boiling over. Zach, who dumped all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me, was enjoying an affair with my sister, Nicole. And Nicole too, after borrowing all that money from me, she slept with my husband and even called me an ATM at the end. It was unforgivable. You're okay with us divorcing, right? When Zach pressed me, I simply nodded yes. On the other end of the phone, the two of them cheered. Enjoy it while you can. There's no way they won't get their comeuppance for belittling me like this. I bit my lip hard. My name is Maggie. I'm 60 years old, living with my husband Zach, who's 5 years my senior. Our son, Alan, is 30 this year, already independent and out of the house. I was working part-time at a grocery store until recently, but due to the recent surge in prices, I was forced into early retirement for cost-cutting. The manager, who was very kind since I worked there for many years, even gave me a severance package despite being part-time. It's a bit sad to retire before reaching the age of retirement, but working at the grocery store definitely helped me grow. So I'm very grateful to the manager who continued to employ me. One might think I'm set for a slow life in retirement, but actually, I'm having some domestic issues. Well, more with Zach than with the household. With our loveless and distant marriage, I'm very anxious about living together for many more years. Why did it come to this? Let me start from the beginning. I met Zach over 40 years ago. Back then, I was a student job hunting, talking to various industry veterans. Most of them were seniors from the newspaper club I was part of. At a club drinking party, many alumni, including Zach, would show up. Maggie, what kind of company do you want to work for? Zach, rumored to be the handsome senior in the club, asked me with a comfortable distance. I honestly told him I wanted to work for a stable company. How about the bank I work at? Banking's probably the most stable, right? Indeed, it seems like a solid job. While my response was cliché, I was happy Zach invited me to his bank. Encouraged by Zach, I applied to his bank and got the job. It wasn't too difficult as the bank hired many students from my university. Once I started working at the bank, I realized many women liked him. Zach, always invited out for meals after work, seemed out of reach for me. But Zach often asked me out, and despite feeling guilty towards his other admirers, I started going out with him more as I was interested. So, we started dating and got married 3 years later, after which I quit the bank. It's regretful to quit just after 4 years, but back then, most women quit upon marriage. Especially since Zach and I were in the same workplace, he seemed to prefer I work part-time elsewhere. I had no regrets about marrying Zach and quitting my job. For a while, we enjoyed our life together until I got pregnant and gave birth to our son, Alan, at 30. Zach, who used to treat me like a princess, suddenly became indifferent after the birth. Zach, can you make a bottle for Alan? A bottle? That's a mom's job. Why do I have to do it? His sudden change in attitude left me more in shock rather than in sadness or anger. I had heard that men sometimes lose interest when their wives give birth. But I thought that was a story for only a small fraction of couples. I never imagined that Zach, who loved me so much, would suddenly cast me aside like throwing something into the open sea after I had our child. From then on, every day was a whirlwind. Zach continued to refuse to help with the baby. Taking care of the baby is a mom's job. Plus, you're a housewife, so it's natural for you to take care of it. I'm busy with work. Zach had his plausible reasons, but they didn't satisfy me. But it's my first time too, and raising the baby alone is hard work. As I countered while watching Zach's reaction, he glared at me. If it's that hard, why don't you go to my dad's? Dad's free and can help you out. To your father? Yeah, that's right. I was utterly shocked by Zach's suggestion. Zach's mom had passed away early, and only his dad, Bob, was left, who recently had trouble with his legs and might need to go to a care facility. How could he think of leaving our child with Bob? Moreover, Zach completely refused to be involved with the baby, essentially just dumping it on his parents. Zach's outlandish idea left me troubled. Since then, I received little help from Zach in raising Alan, and I had to do it alone, repeatedly reading childcare books. Fortunately, Alan was a well-behaved and obedient child who listened to me and grew up healthy. When Alan turned 5, after sending him off to kindergarten, I noticed a call on my mobile phone. Maggie, it looks like Dad collapsed. I'm thinking of putting him in a facility. Can you handle the paperwork? What? Collapsed? Is he okay? And about the facility? I was very surprised by Zach's call. The news of Bob's collapse was alarming. I hoped he had been taken to the hospital in time. Given Bob's leg condition, it must have been quite a struggle. Bob had always been fond of me, treating me like his own daughter, and I regularly took Alan to visit him, even without Zach asking. The in-laws' house was about a 40-minute drive from our home. Every time we visited, "Thank you for coming all this way," Bob would say with a kind smile. Alan and I both loved Bob and, despite the distance, always wanted to visit him again and again. Hearing that Bob had collapsed, I was filled with anxiety, but Zach only mentioned putting him in a facility in a matter-of-fact tone, which irritated me. Just handle it, I'm busy with work, okay? Wait a minute. Zach cut the call quickly after saying his piece. The idea of putting Bob in a facility was unthinkable to me. Unless it was Bob's own wish, it seemed like Zach was just deciding to put him in a facility on his own. After much thought, I decided to take care of Bob myself as soon as he recovered. When I arrived at the hospital where Bob had been sent, he was in the hospital room and had already regained his consciousness. Bob was over 70 but had struggled to continue the family's farming business despite his leg issues. Both Zach and I had asked Bob to rest, but he insisted on going to the field that day. Maggie, sorry for troubling you. No, please, just don't strain yourself anymore. All right. It seemed Bob had learned his lesson this time and stopped going to the field after being discharged. Bob's field was no longer used for crops, leaving only an empty land. Though it could be revived with care, the land would probably be passed on to Zach, his only son, who I doubted would take up farming. I felt sorry for the neglected field but thought it was for the best if it meant Bob wouldn't strain himself further. After that, I started caring for Bob, visiting the in-laws' house about 3 times a week. I also began working part-time at the grocery store around that time, juggling work, childcare, caregiving, and household chores. For childcare, I switched Alan from kindergarten to daycare with extended hours, managing to make time. I worked 4 mornings a week till after lunch and then went to the in-laws' house. After caring for Bob, I would pick up Alan from daycare, go home, and make dinner. It was very challenging initially due to inexperience. Though it became slightly easier as I got used to it, I didn't realize how tired I was becoming. I had no time to talk to Zach and was overwhelmed just dealing with the tasks at hand. 10 years passed in this manner, and I turned 45, Zach 50. By then, Alan had become a teenager and often rebelled against me. But I saw this as a sign of his growing independence and, while feeling a bit lonely, I was happy about his growth. However, Alan never showed any defiance towards Zach. In fact, he hardly ever spoke to him. Zach had abandoned any childcare responsibilities from Alan's birth, leaving everything to me, so it seemed Alan didn't really think of Zach as his dad. It was around this time that our loveless and distant family relationship reached a critical point. The catalyst was a call from my sister, Nicole. Hi, Maggie. I just got back from a trip to Hawaii with friends and I've got some souvenirs for you. Can I drop by your place? Nicole, my elder sister by 3 years, has always been reckless with money and had a fiery temperament, making us quite incompatible. she always wore flashy makeup and was more beautiful than me. I was suspicious of her intention to give me souvenirs but couldn't refuse her kind gesture and agreed. When Nicole came over the weekend, she handed me the souvenirs, which I realized were not from Hawaii and were clearly common sweets available locally. I chose to stay silent, thinking that pointing this out would only upset her. "Hey, Maggie. I'm short on cash this month. Can you lend me some money?" Suddenly visiting with a fake souvenir and now this, I wondered what she was up to. "Lend you money? Why?" I suspected it was just Nicole's usual spending habits leaving her broke. "Well, I've been feeling unwell lately. The doctor said I might need to be hospitalized. But I don't have insurance and can't afford the hospital and treatment costs." Nicole, sounding feeble, left me speechless. What kind of illness required hospitalization? I silently stared at Nicole, who looked at me pleadingly. "Okay. Just pay me back after your treatment." "Thanks. Sisters are the best." Nicole's face lit up as she shook my hand. Despite our differences, she was my sister and I wanted her to get well soon if she was ill. "By the way, when is Zach getting back?" Once Nicole knew I'd lend her the money, she casually asked this. "Zach just went to the grocery store." "Oh, I see. I'll just say hi then and leave." Right then, the front door opened and Zach returned. "Hey, Zach." "Oh, Nicole. You're here." "Yes, just had something to discuss with Maggie. But I'm done now and will be leaving." As Nicole stood up and passed by Zach, she seemed to whisper something in his ear. After Nicole left, "What did Nicole say to you earlier?" I asked, but "Nothing important." Zach evaded the question. I remained curious but soon forgot about it. The discovery of Zach and Nicole's affair happened a month later. I planned to visit Bob that day, but work got extended, so I postponed my visit to the in-laws' house to the next day and went home as usual. Alan was at the library, so only Zach should have been home. "Why are there women's shoes here?" As I took off my shoes at the entrance, I noticed a familiar pair of heels. They were the high heels Nicole wore over the weekend. Entering the house, the living room was empty, which relieved me momentarily. But then, from the bedroom, I heard faint, indiscreet voices of Zach and Nicole. "What are they doing?" I considered confronting them right then but hesitated at the last moment. What if Zach demands a divorce after being exposed? Alan wouldn't want to live with Zach. But I wasn't confident I could afford Alan's education fees alone. If we were to divorce, I wanted to wait until Alan had graduated from college. Frustrated, I decided to leave the house, pretending I saw nothing. Instead, I gathered evidence of the affair, taking photos of their traces and secretly saving the exchanges between Zach and Nicole from his mobile phone. It appeared they had been having an affair for about 6 months. Despite the anger boiling inside me, I reminded myself it was for Alan and endured, not exposing the affair. Another 15 years have passed since then, and Alan is now part of the working world. After graduating from college and leaving his first job early, Alan set up his own business and is now working hard as its president. And as the story goes, I had retired from the grocery store, but I was working a little at Alan's company. I had been giving Nicole money for her treatment bit by bit, but when her requests became too persistent, I grew reluctant to lend more and started ignoring her calls. In fact, the signs of Nicole and Zach's affair had disappeared about a year after it came to light. Zach probably got bored of Nicole. He changed his mind and chose to stay married to me. Knowing this, I couldn't bring myself to pursue the matter of the affair anymore and decided to pretend it never happened. But I realized my naivety when I heard about Bob's death. I got the news about Bob from Zach during the day. Bob had lived a long life until 95, but I was deeply shocked by the loss of Bob, who I had cared for so long. Bob, unlike Zach, was kind and considerate, so his passing felt like losing my own parent. Yet even then, Zach said, "Dad seems to have accumulated a lot of wealth, so that's exciting." Laughing. I was so angry that I thought of giving Zach a piece of my mind, but then I heard a woman's laughter from nearby. Oops, did she realize we're together? I was chilled to the bone at the sound of Nicole's voice. Had Nicole and Zach's relationship not ended after all? For 15 years, they had continued their affair without my knowledge. Realizing this, they seemed like an incomprehensible entity to me. I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed. I could hear the mocking laughter over the phone. But I didn't let out a sound of surprise. I thought if I played into their hands, it would weaken my position, and by now, I had not an iota of love left for Zach. Okay, brace yourself. I replied calmly, but inside, anger was boiling over. Zach, who dumped all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me, was enjoying an affair with Nicole. And Nicole too, after borrowing all that money from me, she slept with my husband and even called me an ATM at the end. It was unforgivable. You're okay with us divorcing, right? When Zach pressed me, I simply nodded yes. On the other end of the phone, the two of them cheered. Enjoy it while you can. There's no way they won't get their comeuppance for belittling me like this. I bit my lip hard. After Bob's funeral, I filed for divorce as promised. When I informed Zach, he seemed so delighted that it felt like he was doing it on purpose. Now that we're divorced, you should leave this house as soon as possible. Me leave? I asked, surprised, and Zach nodded as if it were obvious. I'm going to live with Nicole, and you'll be living alone. This house is too big for one person. Anger turned to disbelief, and I said, okay. Too weary to argue, and agreed to Zach's demands. Though upset, I had already considered my living situation before the divorce. Leaving our home, I headed to Alan's, who was living independently. I had contacted Alan beforehand, and he welcomed his mom, who had just left Zach, with open arms. He's truly a kind son. I resolved to work even harder at Alan's company. A few days later, a man claiming to be a lawyer contacted me. When I went to the specified location, Zach, Nicole, and the lawyer were seated. I am in possession of a will left by Zach's dad, the lawyer said, and took out the will signed by Bob from his bag. I was surprised as I didn't know Bob had left a will. As Zach's only child, he was the legal heir to Bob's assets. Being no longer Zach's wife, I had no claim to any inheritance. Why was I called then? As I wondered, the lawyer read the will. Its contents were astounding. Bob had left half of his assets to me. That meant the field Bob owned was now part of my estate. While Zach would inherit the other half due to his legal share, he had surely not expected me to inherit anything. Why does Maggie get half of the inheritance? I'm his only son, I should receive it all. Dad was very grateful to Maggie for her selfless care, even though they were not related by blood. He meant it as a thank you. Bob. I was deeply moved by Bob's thoughtfulness. What the heck is this? I thought we could finally relax with the inheritance. Nicole twisted her face in frustration. The lawyer then mentioned that Bob's will had also left all of his debts to Zach, but it seemed Zach and Nicole were too upset to hear that part. I was overwhelmed with gratitude towards Bob, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. Thank you, Bob. Seeing me in tears, the two of them seemed to grow even angrier, but the lawyer concluded. That is the content of the will. With that, Zach and Nicole seemed to snap back to reality. I'm not happy about losing half, but hey, we still have half of the inheritance left. Gotta thank the law for that. Zach said as he patted Nicole's shoulder, who nodded in agreement, right. Well, we'll be leaving now. We won't have anything to do with you anymore, so take care. They laughed loudly as they left. I returned to Alan's house, savoring Bob's last act of kindness. After receiving the inheritance from Bob, I continued working at Alan's place without incident, and before I knew it, 2 months had passed. That's when Zach called me, on a Sunday. Alan and I were both off work, relaxing at home, but my mobile phone started ringing insistently. Zach! The air froze between me and Alan as we realized it was Zach calling. Why is Dad calling? He abandoned you, and now what does he want? You don't have to answer. Alan said so, but the phone kept ringing persistently. Irritated, I decided to answer to silence Zach. What is it, calling me repeatedly? You said we wouldn't have anything to do with each other ever again. I answered with a tone of annoyance, but Zach seemed not to hear me and started talking frantically. Hey, what's going on? Why are you working at Alan's company? And why is Alan's company being featured on TV? And what's with showing your fancy house? Zach's near hysterical voice echoed through the phone, causing Alan to frown. You saw the TV. I realized why Zach was calling all of a sudden. Recently, a TV station had interviewed Zach's gym, and it was broadcast yesterday. Alan's gym, which combines a gym and cafe, had caught the TV station's interest due to its novelty. Since opening, the gym had rapidly increased its membership, and Alan appeared on TV as a successful young entrepreneur, even showcasing our home as Zach mentioned. The house we live in now, Alan's home, is quite luxurious, far surpassing the neighboring houses in size. So Zach saw Alan's house and was shocked enough to call. What do you mean you guys are living in such a big house? Over here, Nicole used up all of Dad's inheritance, and I even got left with his debts. Damn it, I didn't hear about that from the lawyer back then. Zach yelled angrily over the phone. But back then, the lawyer did mention that Bob had left all his debts to Zach. It wasn't my fault that Zach had not listened, and it was none of my business. It's none of my business, Zach. The lawyer clearly mentioned it, and it's your responsibility for not paying attention. Besides, you knew about Nicole's spending habits even before marrying her, right? I gave her money for treatment and haven't been repaid yet. This just proves to me that you and Nicole are the worst kind of people, quick to betray someone you should trust. In response to my correct argument, Zach remained silent, unable to say anything. Besides, isn't it all your fault for cheating on me in the first place? I just don't understand why I have to be blamed. I let out my pent-up frustrations, feeling somewhat relieved. Realizing he couldn't blame me, Zach suddenly changed his tone to a pleading one. Please, Maggie. I'm begging you, lend me some money. I was supposed to get a retirement fund this year, but I got fired, and all I'm left with are Dad's debts. Nicole left after we argued about money. How am I supposed to live now? You're my only hope. I admit I was wrong about everything. I apologize. Just give me a little bit of Dad's inheritance. You're living a good life with Alan, right? Think of it as helping someone out, okay? His nerve to beg his ex-wife for money after cheating and leaving her was beyond comprehension. Alan, who had been listening to the conversation, looked at me, seemingly wanting to say something. I handed my mobile phone to Alan. Alan turned on the speaker and firmly said to Zach, Dad, you betrayed Mom and married Nicole, right? And I heard you never took care of me since I was born. I don't have any memories of playing with you after I became aware. It was always just Mom and me. On Parents' Day and Sports Day, it was always just Mom who came. That's why I'm helping Mom with my company and living with her. Why should I, who you never did anything for, lend you money? My only parent is Mom. I won't give you a single dollar. Alan's strong, businesslike tone choked me up. I could sense Zach gasping on the other end of the phone. Alan, how could you say that to your dad? Fine, I won't rely on you guys ever again. Don't insult me. With that, Zach hung up. We looked at the silent mobile phone and then burst out laughing together. Zach begged us for money, and now he says he won't have anything to do with us. What an idiot. Yeah. Dad has always been like that, getting angry without thinking ahead. As we discussed Zach's foolishness, the phone rang again. It was Zach. He probably wanted to ask for money despite saying he wouldn't contact us again. Fed up, I blocked Zach's contact. That's it. Now that fool can't bother us anymore. Yeah. Thanks, Mom. His gratitude for being raised seemed implicit. I should be the one thanking you. You've given me such a great life. No matter how old you get, you're still my precious son. We reaffirmed our bond as mother and son, grateful for each other's presence in our spacious home. A few days later, my sister Nicole called me. Her request was almost identical to what Zach had said. I couldn't fathom lending more money to Nicole, who hadn't even repaid what she owed me. In fact, I hadn't yet demanded compensation for her affair with Zach, so I successfully sued both of them for damages through a lawyer. They ended up getting divorced after being married. Their marriage only lasted for 2 months. Zach was even worse off than Nicole. The negative inheritance he received from Dad was too substantial. Bob had borrowed a lot of money for farming, managing it all by himself. I hadn't known about it. While caring for Bob, he often complained about Zach. Bob was able to forgive Zach for not taking over the farming business, but the fact that he didn't take care of Alan and not visit his own father was unforgivable. He was also furious with the way Zach treated me, and I always tried to soothe him, saying it was okay. If kind Bob was that angry, Zach must have been quite a negligent son. All of Zach's expected retirement funds were gone due to his dismissal for misconduct. Rumor has it he even tried to embezzle money from his bank to pay off his debts. Had he just worked quietly until the end, he would have received his retirement money. His greed was his downfall. Now, while receiving a pension, he seems to be working 3 part-time jobs to pay off his debts. Starting a new job at 65 and being taught by younger people as a newcomer must be shattering his pride. Although he has worked as a bank employee for many years, his part-time job as a new employee involves a lot of odd jobs. A hard adjustment for someone who never did housework, childcare, or elder care. He'll likely give up soon enough. For Zach, who neglected his son and cheated with Nicole for years, it's a fitting punishment. I hope he manages until the end. As for me, I'm still working energetically at Alan's workplace. The staff, who are around my child's age, treat me very kindly. Our workplace is always full of smiles, attracting many customers. Alan recently got engaged to a girl a year younger than him and introduced her to me. She's a wonderful, sensible young lady. Well respected at work. I was planning to move out when they married, but she insisted we live together. I'm grateful for her kindness and looking forward to our future together.